$200, even $500 is not out of the question when you get into that final manic bubble phase. Silver can go up 100% in 6 weeks during that final phase.
This week's special with Miles Franklin Precious Metal Investments. 1 ounce silver buffalo rounds for only $2.99 over spot. Call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is Gary Savage from Smart Money Tracker. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. It's great to have you. And you actually recently reported how you are starting this year cautiously optimistic or cautiously bullish on gold right now. What is gold telling you technically?
Well, it's up in the air a little bit. There's several resistance levels that we have to get through. The first one is that 1835. It was kind of a triple top several months ago, and we briefly broke out of it, but it was late in the intermediate cycle. Breakouts that occur late in the cycle generally don't produce sustained moves, and that's what happened with gold. And then we dropped back below that 1835 and dropped down into what might potentially be kind of a shallow intermediate cycle low. We tested that 835 the other day, and it got rejected yesterday. But we're trying to come back again today. So I think a lot of it just depends on what the currencies do. The dollar is way overdue for an intermediate decline, but the ongoing currency wars, the ECB would like to keep the euro suppressed against the dollar, keep the dollar propped up. So I really have no idea whether the dollar will. It kind of looks like it's hit a resistance zone here and it's struggling. If the dollar does turn back down, then it's going to be a lot harder to keep gold suppressed. So at that point, if gold could get above 1835, I would start to get a little more bullish. And then if it can get above, I believe it's 1880, that's looks like the prior intermediate top. If it could get above that, it would get really bullish. And then a move above 1920, and I would be on board with to the moon, just like all the other gold analysts. But got to get through 1835 first, and I think the dollar has to give us some indication that it's ready to finally move down into an intermediate cycle low.
Now, I know a lot of people are quite bullish this month and this year in precious metals, but I mean, you mentioned how you're cautious, and I mean, I believe we've spoken before, and how you're saying we could just see a lot of consolidation this year.
Very possible. If the dollar continues to rally, then I think gold is probably going to stay stuck in this difficult sideways back and forth market. The one bullish thing, I noticed just looking at some long-term charts the other day, the one bullish thing is the dollar's been rallying pretty strongly, but gold has mostly just been going sideways, which is a big improvement. Most of the time, if the dollar's rallying strongly, then gold is falling strongly. And it hasn't been doing that. It's been mostly just going sideways. So that's an improvement. So I think it's set up and ready to go if the dollar will just turn back down.
When it comes to gold versus silver, do you see silver performing pretty much the same in 2020 as gold?
Well, it'll follow gold. Silver tends to follow gold and magnify the move. So if gold starts to go up, silver will usually go up by a factor of 2 or 3 times as much as gold does. So just waiting on to see what happens with the dollar and whether or not this recent low turns out to be an intermediate cycle low or just a minor daily cycle low that's going to not be able to get through that 835 and then go back down and make a lower low. It's just up in the air right now. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess as to which way it's going to go. It can go either way.
I think if we do see further consolidation, though, that just presents a buying opportunity, right? And a way to accumulate more, because as we've talked about before, I mean, the fundamentals for both gold and silver, and especially silver, are extremely bullish.
It does. I think, if we keep going sideways, I think is a perfect opportunity to accumulate. Personally, I like silver the best. I've been on record saying that $100 silver is going to be a piece of cake. Now, it's not going to happen next year. It's going to be, the bull market in the metals is going to last 5 to 8 years. So it'll take a while to get there. But I think $100 silver is going to be a piece of cake, just like $10,000 or 10,000 on the NASDAQ was a piece of cake. I said years ago that the NASDAQ was definitely going to 10,000 and maybe possibly to 20,000. And, we're getting pretty close. We tagged 16,000 recently. So $100 silver, anything in this range, anywhere in $20 to $25 range, I think is going to make you a lot of money over the next 8 years. And $200, even $500 isn't out of the question when you get into that final manic bubble phase. Silver can go up 100% in 6 weeks during that final phase. So, we could chug and grind and maybe get to $100, $150 in the next 5 years. And then in the last 6 weeks, you could go from $100 to $500.
Now, for the last year or so, we have been stuck in that kind of $20 to $30 range. Do you see silver falling below that range?
Again, I think it depends on what the dollar does. This is the opportunity for it to do that. If the dollar continues to rally and doesn't roll over in this current daily cycle and gold were to left translate and move down, then silver's probably going to follow it. And this would be an opportunity for it to go below maybe $20, maybe test that 200-week moving average. And I think that would be a great buying opportunity to accumulate more physical silver. And I like physical silver. Easier to hold on to. You're not as panicky and not as apt to sell at a bottom if you're, holding nice shiny silver bars as opposed to shares in SLV. And you open up your account and you see your account's down and you tend to panic and sell. With silver, with physical silver, that's not going to happen. It's easy to hold through whatever correction we have.
I think that's so true. And it's going back to the basics of like, this is real money, right? Are there any other main reasons you prefer physical silver versus the electronic versions like the ETFs?
Well, I think when we have our next bear market in the stocks, our next recession, things could get really bad. And I really don't want all of my wealth in the financial system, just in case there are bail-ins or, whatever. If the banking system implodes, I don't want my wealth where the government can get their hands on it. I'd rather have it where I can keep an eye on it. So that's another reason. And then also the more of us that take physical silver off the market, the harder it's going to be for the banking system to manipulate the metals.
No, when it comes to the other markets this year, kind of looks like we have a split market right now where some indices are rallying, some are falling. What do you see for the stock market for 2022?
And that's really apparent today as we're speaking. The Dow is up and at new highs. The S&P made new highs. The Russell did not. The NASDAQ has not made a new high yet. So it is a split market. And I think that's the volatility is probably going to get worse this year. And if this split market keeps up, then I think at some point this spring we're going to have a really nasty correction. And it usually is just dependent on how far the market stretches to the upside, because the market kind of works like a pendulum. The further you stretch it one way, then the more aggressive and harsh the move can be back in the other direction. So we're getting pretty close to 5,000 on the S&P. If we can get a little closer, then I think that number will kind of pull like a magnet, pulling the market higher. If we were to get to 5,000, say over the next month and a half, 2 months, then I think you better be prepared for a really scary, nasty correction later this spring.
Now, in this kind of environment, as we see a lot of consolidation in all the markets, how does an investor play this year?
So my advice is diversify a little bit. I like to tell my subscribers have a third in metals, a third in energy, and a third in stocks. I like a long-term position in XLE. It's not quite as volatile as OIH. It's got a good dividend. So it's a little easier to ride out the corrections in XLE than it would be in OIH. But I think they're both going to do pretty good over the next 4 or 5 years. Just, a little easier to hang on to XLE. For metals, I think you should have most of your third in physical silver. If you want to take a little bit, maybe 2 or 3, or at most maybe 5% of your capital that you're allocating to metals to try and play the intermediate swings, go ahead. But if it continues to be whipsawing like it is right now, it's really it's not hard to make money. It's hard to keep it. So you make a little bit, you lose a little bit. You make a little bit, you lose a little bit. If you're just buying and accumulating physical silver, you're not going to have that problem, and you'll be there whenever the move starts. Stocks may be tough. They were really easy last year, made a lot of money, really easy to make money last year. If we get into a sideways year, especially if the spring correction is really nasty, we could be stuck in a sideways market into the election this year as well, and that would make it would be hard to make sustainable gains in the stock market if that happens. So might want to lower our expectations a little bit. I don't think we're going to have as easy of a year this year as we did last year, but I do think there's good money to be made in energy, maybe metals, if the dollar will ever give us an intermediate decline, and stocks. I think they're waiting for the NASDAQ to break through that 16,000. When it does that, as long as it doesn't do it late in the intermediate cycle. As I said, breakouts that occur late in the cycle don't tend to produce sustained moves. So if we can get a breakout in the NASDAQ here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, then we've got enough time. We could get a really explosive move to 17,000. But at that point, then I think you probably need to get out of the way, because I think we're going to have a really nasty correction.
Before we let you go, I did want to touch on energy. I know you've said that oil has probably bottomed. Your perspective, if you can expand on energy in 2022.
I think energy will do really good, although we've come a long way from that bottom. It may be time for energy to churn sideways for a year as well. I'm kind of watching this move out of this. We've got an intermediate cycle low in oil, and we're in the advancing phase of this first daily cycle. If we can get back up and test those recent highs at, I think it was about $86. If we can get back up there really quick, early in the intermediate cycle, then we have a chance to break out. Maybe we go to $100. If we churn and waste a lot of time, then we may be stuck in a sideways year for energy.
Gary, we really appreciate your time today. Before we let you go, where can our viewers find you online? And did you have any last thoughts for our viewers?
So you can just Google Smart Money Tracker, and that will take you to, you'll get links to either the premium website or the blog. I do post some videos from time to time on the blog, which is kind of an abbreviated version of what I do with the premium newsletter. So if you want to get some idea of what my analysis looks like, you can just check out the free blog and see the videos there, and you'll get an idea of how I analyze with cycles and sentiment.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. 31 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded. For physical delivery, vault storage, or precious metals IRAs, excellent prices, privacy, and confidentiality. Pay by check, money order, ACH, bank wire, or Bitcoin. Satisfaction guaranteed. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs.